So for this first part of our explainer, we're just going to focus on the introduction to his paper. This is where we'll get all the essential background, the core ideas, the key terms, and most importantly, the big question that this whole study is trying to answer.
All right, so the research kicks off on some pretty familiar ground, second language learning, and it zeroes in on one of the biggest hurdles for pretty much any learner, pronunciation. I mean, if you've ever tried to learn a new language, you know exactly how crucial and how frustrating it can be to get those sounds just right.
So why all the focus on pronunciation? Why is it so important? Well, think about it. At the end of the day, for most of us, the goal of learning a new language isn't just to, read a book in it. It's to actually speak it. And the paper really drives this point home with a quote from a researcher named Lusick. He points out that the real goal isn't just knowing a bunch of words, it's about being able to communicate with people, both native speakers and other learners. And that one simple idea, that's the engine driving this whole focus on speech. And that's where we find the key link, right? For communication to actually work, people have to be able to understand you. It's not about sounding perfect or losing your accent. It's simply about making sure the other person can actually grasp what you're trying to say. And accurate pronunciation? Well, that's the foundation for all of it. Okay, and this brings us to a really critical distinction that the paper makes right at the beginning. It's the difference between having an accent and having low intelligibility. Now, a lot of people mix these two up, but they are absolutely not the same thing. So what is the difference? Well, a foreign accent is really just a speech pattern that someone can hear. It doesn't mean they can't understand you. Low intelligibility, though, that's a whole different story. That's a real barrier. That's when someone literally can't comprehend what you're saying. So the big takeaway here is super important. Having an accent isn't the issue. Being unintelligible is. And the research gives us some really helpful insights on this. First off, it's totally normal for even incredibly fluent speakers to still have a foreign accent. And that's okay. As long as people can understand you, it's not a problem. But there's also a really hopeful note here. With the right kind of phonetic training, speaking skills can definitely get better. Okay, so now that we've got that background on pronunciation covered, the paper starts to zoom in. It moves from these big, broad concepts to the specific focus of this investigation. Now, this study isn't happening in a vacuum. It's actually building on a long history of research. For years, linguists have been using this technique called acoustic analysis. What it does is let them scientifically compare how vowels are produced in a speaker's native language, which they call L1, versus a second language, or L2. So you might be wondering, what exactly is acoustic analysis? Well, in simple terms, it's the science of studying sound signals. And for this particular research, it means measuring the physical properties of the vowel sounds that people make when they talk. The cool thing about this is that it allows for these incredibly precise, totally objective comparisons. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of this particular study. The main goal, to measure how accurately learners could produce 6 very specific French vowel contrasts. And who are the participants? Well, they were all native American English speakers from the Midwest, and they all learned French in a classroom setting. All of this data was collected back in the spring of 2023. And this all boils down to the one central question that drives this entire study. To what extent can these learners actually produce these tricky French vowel contrasts accurately? That is the big question this research wants to answer. And in our next explainer, we're going to dig into how they did it, the methodology, and of course, what they discovered.